everyone to this meeting of the South Tahoe Community. If you will, all please stand and join me in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thanks again everyone for coming. Do we have any comments from the audience on non-agenda items? And none.
Here, you can share.
Let's move on to, are there any corrections to the agenda or consent calendar? See a big rush for that either. Do we have a motion?
I'll move adoption of the consent calendar.
Second that. And that passes 5 minutes. Thanks, everyone. At this time, it looks like we have a presentation.
If you do, Justin from our audit firm is here to present our findings for our June 30th, 2018 audit.
Thank you. As Paul mentioned, here to present the results of the audit for the year ended June 30th, 2018. Monthly knowledge for land management boards is the financial statements themselves or the responsibility management. And that's our job as the auditor to come and inform an independent opinion on those financials that indicate whether or not they're fairly stated. Talk a little bit about our audit process. We began our interim phase in May. A big part of the interim phase is the internal control documentation and testing that we perform. When we're out here, this is four of the main areas that we look at. And these 4 items here really go for any organization, but we look at the cash receipts and revenue, any revenue coming into the organization, to the district to see, make sure the proper controls are in place. Look at cash disbursements or expenses, making sure that invoices are properly approved. There's a proper segregation of duties and approval process for all disbursements. Look at the HR and payroll processes. HR, we look at hire terminations, making sure pay rates are proper. Also look at the payroll process as it occurs on a regular basis, make sure the proper approval before the checks are cut, etc. Then the financial reporting, and the big part of the financial reporting controls are how those other areas, especially on a day-to-day basis, roll up into your accounting system, and then ultimately to the financial statements where we form our audit opinion. We also look if there are any findings from the prior year audit. Usually if we have findings there during this time of the year when we're looking at your controls, so we'll look at what we had last year to make sure that those were implemented. So once the books are closed, a lot of schedules are prepared by finance for us. We come out to the year-end phase of the audit, and this was the last week of August this year. And this is what most people think of when you think of an audit. It's a testing of the numbers. So we're testing year-end balances as well as activity throughout the year. Some examples of the type of testing we do during this phase: cutoff testing, making sure that transactions are recorded in the proper year. So we look at transactions that occurred after June 30th as well as before June 30th, make sure they're recorded properly. We send confirmations to third parties, such as financial institutions, to make sure the balances agree with what the district has on the books. Also do analytical review procedures. Some examples of those are we look at year-to-year variances in different accounts. We perform ratio analysis, more at a high level to make sure that things are in line with our expectations. And if there's any anomalies, we can investigate those areas further. Also do detailed transaction testing. So that's really where we're drilling down into supporting documents, invoices. If we're looking at payroll or HR, we're going down to personnel action forms or hiring documents. Also perform the single audit, which is the federal audit during this time of the year. and then we wrap it up with preparing the financial statements. So to report the results of the audit, there are 5 different documents that we issue. Our audit opinion, government audit standards report, a single audit report, and then 2 separate letters, the communication to those charged with governance, which is you, and then a report to management. So we'll quickly go over the results of each of those reports. First one, as I mentioned, this is the main one. This is our audit report. This is our opinion on the financials to indicate whether or not they're fairly stated. The 4 different types of opinions we can give. The good news here is we have an unmodified opinion with the district, which is good news. That means it's a clean audit opinion on the financials. Next report we issue is called the Government Audit Standards Report. The main thing to know about this report is if we identify any deficiencies or weaknesses in your internal controls, we're required to put those in one of 3 categories. The most severe is a material weakness, which is a major breakdown in your controls to the point that the numbers can be incorrect. Next one down is a significant deficiency, and the third one is called control deficiency or management letter comment. If it's one of those top 2, it's required to get reported in this government audit standards report in a particular finding format that's required by the government audit standards board. And these findings would be included in your audited financial statement packet. As you can see, we don't have any of those. That's good news. We do have a couple of the what are called control deficiencies or management letter comments get reported on a separate letter outside of the audited financial report. I'll get to those in a second. Next report we issue, as I mentioned, is the federal single audit. So any organization in the United States that receives more than $750,000 in federal funds in a year has to get this additional report. And there's additional testing that we perform to make sure that the expenditures are in compliance with the grant requirements, that the timing is correct for the expenditures. There's a list of different compliance areas that we're required to test related to each of these grants. And in this case, we had no compliance exceptions or material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. Definitely good news there. The next letter we issue, we call it the SAS 114 letter, which stands for Statement of Auditing Standard 114. It's a letter that we provide to the board that accomplishes certain requirements that we're required to communicate to you. So in addition to the audit opinion, there's some other things that we're required to let you know about. Nothing unusual here, very standard letter. We're required to let you know if there are any new accounting policies that work on the estimates that are on your financials. We're required to let you know which ones those are. Nothing unusual here. Depreciation and the net pension liability are normal estimates, the net pension liability, especially for a governmental entity. No difficulties performing the audit or disagreements with management. No audit adjustments. As I mentioned to the Finance Committee in the meeting prior to this one, this is a really key one here. Throughout the course of the year, Finance Committee board receives financial information from management. If at the end of the year, you see the auditor come in and have a whole lot of audit adjustments, that may give you some concern as a board to think, well, what were we looking at during the course of the year? How could that information be corrected? There are a lot of audit adjustments at the end of the year. So the fact that we had none really gives you a little confidence in the numbers that you're looking at throughout the year are correct. So we have one past adjustment, which is considered a minor, what we call immaterial adjustment related to inventory price testing. And then the last report we issue, as I mentioned, if we had any significant deficiencies and material weaknesses, we would report them in that government audit standards report, and we did not have those, so we just have this separate management letter that describes these what are called control deficiencies or management letter comments. Both of them pertain to inventory. We had a recommendation that just to save time, would be to expense some of the lower dollar value items that are now being currently tracked in inventory. Examples of those are office supplies. So much easier. It's still in accordance with the accounting requirements to just expense those items. It just doesn't take as much time to report them in inventory. And then the other one was improving the organization of the supply inventory. We observed the year-end physical counts, and it was a little difficult for us to ultimately get comfortable with those counts because it was very unorganized and it was hard to get there. And so that was one of the locations. So fairly minor recommendations that we have here. The overall conclusion, we have good, as I mentioned, good news, unmodified opinions, a clean audit opinion on your financials, no material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or compliance exceptions. We have the one management letter comment, and in the main one there, no audit adjustments. They're really, these types of audit results here are really good, about as good as you can get. It really says a lot about the quality of the staff and management that you have here. Paul and his staff do a great job of getting all the information ready for us, and it says a lot about the work they do. We end up with good audit results like this. Any questions?
I say this year after year, but I say it because it never gets old. Debbie Henderson and her staff are second to none, which is why we're able to achieve these results year after year.
I think the other guy was talking has something a little bit to do with that.
Maybe a little.
We met with auditors privately, Chris and I did, as standard opinion they do. If he had met with us prior to this, it would have been, that's usually assigned advantages, but they're meeting with us afterwards, he told us, it's okay. You're missing a quarter and a brown M&M. But we went into the cone of silence and we talked to him, and everything is okay. And we appreciate anybody under 40 doesn't get that. No, that's true. Maybe the came out. We appreciate the completeness of the audit, and we also, it can't be understated, especially on my part, having been here a long time, the quiet service of our financial department that does it day in and day out. And maybe way back there's a big part of it as well. So, thank you. Susan does a good job.
So it looks like board in general doesn't have any questions. I guess it means we trust our finance subcommittee to have asked the tough ones. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about Alpine County.
Next up is, sorry Debbie, I think you're in the middle of something. We're on to Alpine County.
Yeah. So each year, I bring before you the annual mitigation impact fee to Alpine County. It's based upon the percentage increase of sewer units over the prior year. So in this current year, we are calculating that we are going to be paying $114,800, and it actually equated to an increase difference of 178 sewer units over last year. So it was only a $200 increase over last year's fee.
Anybody have any questions or anything?
Well, one of the things we talked about is that they've never had to mitigate anything. So is there any reason why we still have to call it a mitigation fee?
In other words, it would be a little more accurate if it said charity.
Donation. Yes, I've heard it termed as different things, but that's a good one.
Take that under advisement.
Well, it is our current agreement, so we will be most likely voting for it if we have a motion.
I move that we authorize payment of the district's annual mitigation fee to Alpine County in the amount of $114,800.
I'll second that.
And that passes 5-0. Mr. Bledsoe. Tim is the head of our lighting department.
I know you don't know anything about this, but I'll just give you a short, brief story on this. After our last board meeting, I think I brought you 4, 5, 10 different options, but we have now narrowed it down to 2. And the reason that we have narrowed it down to 2 is we did a little bit of research and found out that this is going to require Prop 218 in order to do any increase on the streetlights. Just as a correction on the agenda, I had said that Liberty had advised the district to pass the increase along. They did not do that. That was kind of what I was getting from you guys, that we didn't want to pass this along and we didn't want to go through the Prop 218 process. The time, the cost to do it, it just wasn't feasible for us to do. John has since found out some pretty good information. He has gone back to his regulatory team, and it looks like the streetlight rates can come back down to what we normally pay around January the 1st. And I'll let him, if you want to talk a little bit more about that, John, you can. Yeah, sure.
I'll just do a quick point of information and give it back to you.
Yes, good afternoon. So just, the quick action since the last meeting is regulatory team is proposing to the Public Utility Commission to reallocate the rate, the revenue shortfall we had among all of our rate classes. So that would bring the streetlight rate increase back to a nominal amount, maybe 1% in line with all the other increases. So the bottom line effect would be the overall bill would revert back to what it was before this increase. We've asked them to put that in place January 1st. So the caveat is that's dependent on CPUC approval and review and their timing, but that's what we've asked for. So if that is accomplished, the bill would go back to what it was before the short-term increase. It would still have the increase in place from September through December, but then it would revert back to the previous. So
just to follow up on that, just to let you know, until that time comes, right now we're probably $9,000 or $10,000 into paying streetlights out of our sewer revenues to make up the difference. So a couple of different options here. We can send notice of Liberty to end this on December 31st, or if we want to absorb that $10,000, get the rate back down to where it was come January 1st, and we could do this for another 3 months until the city time to get better new city manager in place, a new board in place, and maybe try to, or we'll have to maybe probably get it worked out by March 31st. I really don't understand anything on
One real quick point of clarification before your discussion. The difference in the streetlight expense that we're having to cover ourselves, we're not using sewer revenues to cover that. It's property tax revenue.
Property tax.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I missed the last meeting, so I'm playing a little bit of catch up. If we're currently doing another Prop 218, why couldn't we just roll it into that? Because it requires a study.
It's going to cause another study for us to have done to determine what to charge for these streetlights, and not to mention the fact we're looking at a new billing system next summer or fall, and we didn't want to transfer any of the sewer light information into that.
In other words, we don't want to be in the light bill.
Don't let them I wonder how much it costs Liberty Utilities, and I'm asking questions you guys already asked, to come up with a computer program for the bill. And they think it's still. I don't see the city saying, yes, we'll do this.
Well, I was going to ask if Jim, do you care to comment on the likelihood of us being able to transfer this over to the city, or I'm sure you and Tim have been talking about that.
No, we haven't.
Oh, you haven't?
No, we haven't.
Good afternoon, Board. Jim Marino, City of South Lake Tahoe Public Works Department. We have had a couple meetings between STPD staff, Liberty Energy, and City Public Works Department. And our intent is to accept the assets if they're brought up to a certain condition. We're a little bit reluctant to accept assets that are were installed in 1966 and do not meet current energy or sustainability issues. So that's where we stand right now. So if we could recommend something today, it would be that you extend this time frame a little bit while we work it out with Liberty Energy and see what we can do in this situation.
Okay, and it's my understanding that Liberty owns the assets, right?
Currently, yes.
Do you guys have the ability to upgrade them to LEDs to where the current standards are?
Yeah, absolutely. We are working on swapping out lights both here and throughout our service territory to LEDs and coming up with an LED rate schedule. That's in progress. So that's going to happen. And then we certainly can upgrade, to all new poles and that kind of thing. And then I think what Jim was just brought up, this issue of potential city ownership and all that we need to explore. But I think I would just second his comment that I think there's some good productive conversations in the works. We just need a little bit more time to flesh those details out. But I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
So what I'm hearing from you and from Jim, this is doable.
Yeah, the solution is doable. We just need to provide the city more information and explore some of their interests and see what that would look like.
Are you talking about a revenue neutral solution for the city? I don't know.
Well,
I'm listening.
Well, right, I mean, with the hope, with LED lights, they use 50% less energy. We, the hope would be that the actual electricity bill goes down somewhat from, right, but the city taking it over would be adding an expense that they don't have now. So it wouldn't be, and then this issue of the city owning the asset, we have to see what the implications are of that cost-wise. So those are all things that need to be, researched.
If I may.
Go ahead.
Good question. Yes, it will cost the city some additional budget. We're in a position, we don't necessarily agree with the basic premise of just stopping these light services for these residents. They've been in place since 1966. There's been a standard established and expected by the property owners out there. Regardless of who owns the asset and how the mechanism works, we have a problem with a 30-day notice and then just shutting off an entire neighborhood of streetlights.
Are some of them in commercial spots too?
There are a few that are in commercial spots, but they're not our primary concern. Really, it comes down to Pioneer Village and a couple of the other smaller subdivisions that these lights exist in, and that these residents have expected that standard since 1966. The city of South Lake Tahoe is not a billing mechanism. We do not have billings. We receive our revenue through property tax. So we would literally have to create a finance division or an amendment to our finance division to start this process. It would be more effective for us to have the utility company bring the poles and the light standards up to current standards acceptable by the city, the infrastructure, and then we inherit the asset. They no longer own it, we do. We own everything about it, and we go to an LED and a sustainable system. We are willing to take on that burden because the cost, we figured it out, the cost is only probably about $12,000 a year in power costs, okay? Although we would have maintenance costs over time. We feel that is a good benefit versus just going into neighborhoods and turning them dark. So we're willing to do that if we can get cooperation out of Liberty Energy to bring these assets up to the standards.
But 12 beats 50, I guess. I thought, don't shoot me, but I'm on way out what you guys can do. I was thinking at one point that the district keep billing and charge the city for billing for you, but at 12 grand it starts looking a little better.
Well, I think one of the concerns, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the reasons why this is an agenda item to begin with is STPD wants to get out of the business of
we have for many years.
Lighting, right? And so it would be kind of a weird situation if you're now billing us and whatnot. I actually read the agenda wrong. I thought you wanted to take all of our streetlights. That's the way I read it today. But we're willing. We're partnering this. What we don't want to see is this rash decision to just arbitrarily turn off electricity to all these residents on these lights.
Well,
That's
Jim,
what we don't want to see.
the reason that was on the table is we don't have the ability to raise rates because of the 218 process.
I understand.
We also don't have the ability ethically to take money from our ratepayers and subsidize lights in very small pockets. And that was our dilemma. And so that's why I'm glad that you guys are working together, working this out. Now that Liberty's put forward this proposed rate structure, that we don't have to go through a 218 process, that we don't have to continue to lose money on it. I myself, we'll see what the rest of the board thinks, am comfortable with letting this go a little longer while the three of you get together and hash out a solution, because I think that everyone here is working together very well.
Yeah, I was thinking something along the same lines. It's become sort of a three-way tug of war, and it was never meant to be. It was just something that we worked on for 20 years that I know of.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to stick it to the city in any way.
No.
But it just, once we got into it, we realized somebody was going to get stuck.
And we've done our due diligence. I mean, we've gone through historical records. You know, we realized Pioneer Village, for example, wasn't even, when the city was incorporated in 1965, it was still under ownership of the county. The city annexed it actually in 1971. And in those annex documents, there's nothing construed about street lighting or a street lighting district. So there was nothing physically conveyed to the city in that regard in annexation. The fact that SDPD maintained the billing cycle for over 40 years now in that subdivision, we're not sure how this works. This is really sort of a gray area for all of us. What I can tell you this is we're not going to amend the city department to do a billing structure for streetlights. Most of our streetlights that we have out in the city now are generally power metered, and we pay them out in general fund as a benefit to the right-of-way.
Like ski run, for example.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, good. Thanks, guys.
I'm educated. All right. Let's give them some time.
Okay, so why don't we do this, Jim? Why don't you tell us what kind of motion you want to do based on what you just heard from the board?
Sure. I think, to keep the ball rolling, I'd like to make a motion that we extend this to March 31st with the intention that the streetlight rates are going to come down in January. And we're not continually dipping into property tax funds.
That was really a very pathetic motion.
I'm sorry.
At this point, it's just.
That's good. Well, it's an action item, so, I move that we postpone it for 6 months. Until March 31st.
I think March 31st, 2019.
Yeah. That's not 6 months. I say 6 months.
Okay, I'm going to do this.
They're just,
I'm glad we're getting this.
They gotta do council, they gotta do everything.
I move that we direct staff to provide notice to Liberty Utilities of the district's intention to discontinue streetlight service billing and advise Liberty Utilities to terminate the streetlight service accounts in the district's name as of March 31st, 2019, if Liberty Utilities postpones their rate increase until at least that date. Is that right? Yeah, that's what he said.
Can I just offer one?
Okay, so that's the motion. Go
Can I
ahead.
just offer one point is just to say that rate increase is already in effect for this interim period. So I just want to be clear that we can't change what exists now. We're working to stop it and revert in January. So I just want to be clear about that.
What does that mean?
That means that right now the rate increase is in play. It's already, all the new rates have been put in place for our whole service territory, which affects the streetlights. So right now they're paying the higher rate, that we're working to reverse it starting January 1st. That's a request to the CPUC to change the streetlight rate increase back, to eliminate the streetlight rate increase for the most part.
So what do we bill the customers? What are we doing?
We can only bill them what we're billing them now.
That's what they were saying.
And that's that $5,000 or $6,000 that Tim mentioned. About
Over 4
$10,000
months.
That it's actually coming on our tax credit, but there's nothing we can do about that. That money's gone, right? raise, but. Okay, so Gary's got to weigh in on this.
Well, just to clean up the motion, I would drop that last clause after March 31st, 2019. Because the other stuff deals with the postponement of the rate increase. The rate increase has already happened, and it's going to happen going on in the future, but a much lesser amount. And you've got a representation right now from Liberty. So I don't think you need it in your motion. No, you leave the end date, everything.
And they just drop it after the comma.
Correct.
Okay, are you good on that, Melanie?
I got it.
Okay, Melanie's got it. So I think we're understanding enough. We need a second on this. We're at second.
Second. Okay, under discussion, I'd like to make it a couple months, 2 or 3 months longer. And I think I lost.
We can revisit this at any time, right? Yes. So if it looks like we get close to our deadline, Dwayne, I'll call you at home and let you know what we do.
Well, what happens if the rate decrease doesn't happen? Or is that not normally the case? Does the CPUC normally approve things you ask for?
As they're currently instructed to say that's what we've asked for.
Yes.
But we can't commit to the CPU's
Absolutely.
decision. So we were asked them to put it in place January 1st. And then we had a good conversation with the regulatory team. They had a sympathetic conversation with them where they supported this restructuring of rates. And so I guess we're hopeful that it's January 1st, but you can't guarantee it because it's not our decision.
In the past, based on your experience, without guarantees, do you think this is likely to happen?
I can't say that.
I didn't put enough qualifiers in there.
I'm going to nod your head.
I'm not trying to equivocate. I'm just saying that's what we asked for and we're hopeful that's
Okay.
Okay, so my next question then is, what if this does not take place? We come back on January 1st and come up with a new idea?
Yeah, that's right. We'll have to revisit the issue.
All right, so we'll just have a new idea or we won't? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for all involved. One of the most convoluted, simple issues I've ever come across. Thanks, Jim. Payment of claims. That's straightforward. All we got to do is spend money.
I'll move to approval of payment of claims in the amount of $1,664,183.07.
Second. Okay, that passes 5-0. All right, we're going to move on to standing and ad hoc committee reports. Under the first one is the executive committee, which is the new general manager contract update. Kelly, did you get that email I got? So Kelly and I got an email where we took the, I guess Nancy and Richard took the previous general manager's contract and strike through it, updated to where we thought we were now. Did you get a copy of that, John?
Yes.
You did not get a copy of that? So at some point, I think we actually can schedule a meeting to start negotiations now with John.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, with
that as a guide. So it wouldn't be inappropriate to go ahead and give John a copy of that now, would it?
If that's what you're proposing to bring, I think, yeah, rather than say that.
Rather than sitting there and hand up to him and say, quick, you got 2 seconds.
Yeah, you got 15 seconds to sign.
So why don't we do this, first of all, is there anything the rest of the board has, any questions of Kelly and I on this?
I just think you two done a great job.
Okay. Why don't we do it this way? Kelly, why don't you and I just coordinate with John and we'll get a time that we can meet on this and just start this guy. I don't think it's going to be a big drawn out process at all. I think it's pretty straightforward. We're just going to kind of keep things the way they have been going along.
Sure. Let me know.
All right, we should be able to do that, when we do that next week. Yeah. So let's think about like first part next week, we'll get together with you and we'll figure something out.
Do you want me to schedule a meeting for conference room?
Sure, once we all have a chance to look at our calendars, and figure out when we're available, we'll get a conference room and schedule that. Okay. In the meantime, who's got that email? I've got it. I guess I could forward it to you, John. I'll do that. If I don't get the screen of death with our uncertified computer system, right? Okay. As far as other standing afternoon reports, we were scheduled to have a meeting with the city today, but with the election and the turnover, that got canceled. We honestly don't know when the next one's scheduled.
December 20th.
And have you had any feedback from the city on if they've got it?
So I spoke with Jean yesterday. She's with the attorney's office and also with the interim manager's office. She said they are confirmed for the 20th. They are planning to hopefully appoint somebody on the 11th is when their new board members and their new city council start. And they're hoping to appoint somebody then to be here on the 20th.
Are you going to volunteer for that committee?
I am.
Okay.
And the new city manager starts on December 5th.
Gotta keep them volunteer.
Okay, so if you do get appointed and do come, try to bring the new city manager with you.
I will.
Okay. All right, is there any other,
Finance committee.
oh yeah, finance committee, which you guys can report, even though you briefly touched on it when the presentation was here. If there's anything you want to add, go ahead.
So we met to discuss the possible, transform one position from water conservation coordinator, I guess that's what it's called, to more of a public information officer position, and expand the role of that position. Well, essentially eliminate the water coordinator position, roll it into the new PIO position, and then expand the successful candidate to public outreach, 218, more local and regional issues, and still let Shannon spearhead all the legislative actions that position was divvied up when we eliminated it several years ago.
So the person would partner with Shannon in covering the state and the legislature. The theory that we had, and Richard's the one that brought it to us, he's the one that asked for permission to let the position slide for about 5 years now. He said after spending the time without it and realizing the amount of time that the general manager and assistant general manager ably put into it, that their time is better spent doing the jobs we're paying them for, and that all the districts, almost all the districts that they've surveyed, have somebody in that position with some type of title or not, or some sort of, PIO, whatever you call it. And we thought that what they came up with made sense, and that was not to create a whole brand new water conservation person, but to have that person more or less answer to Shelley or whoever is in that position who applies.
Although technically it would eliminate that position, but that person would then, they would still have those responsibilities under their purview.
There'd be somebody there at a lower rate, and so the expense would not be as great to the district as having both of those positions.
So expanding the responsibilities of that position,
Basically,
renaming it, and then a natural salary increase to
Back
reflect
to what the original PIO's position.
it's about the equivalent of a half a position.
Okay.
So, yeah, I guess that's it.
And you're both.
Shelley's current position is approximately 100,000 with benefits. The PIO's position was approximately 148 with benefits. So it's an initial bump in salary to this full position.
And
I'd be open to competition.
Yeah, and I take it, I take what both Shannon and Richard said seriously about how their time could be better spent. I appreciate that kind of input.
Well, if you remember when I recommended not filling the position, I asked you guys, the board members, that because you guys are the big interface with the public, that if we started falling down on transparency or our messaging or something, that I expect that you guys to help evaluate our efforts in that domain and if necessary to then move to refill the position. So with of late, the PCE outreach effort that's been going on, with meetings that are going to continue on a quarterly basis, talking about the problem with the upcoming Prop 218 process, it's very obvious that the amount of work necessary to put into a public outreach program is increasing, and that it was going to be very difficult for us to continue that necessary work without somebody really being in charge of that. And so this public affairs manager type position, that would be their role. They would also be continuing to manage the water conservation program through the seasonals that we have been hiring and will continue to hire in the future. So that's the proposal, and if with a nod, we'll bring it back to the next board meeting officially to get your approval to launch the advertising to fill the public outreach, public affairs management position.
Okay. Well, I personally am going to go with the recommendation of the Finance Committee, and so I think you should, I'm seeing some nodding heads around here, so I think you should continue. Great.
Yeah, for the small increase in cost, we get a great deal of benefit from it. Okay, that's my position.
All right, well, very good. Thank you. I think we probably chewed through all the standing ad hoc committee reports, so how about board member reports?
Mine is, I'd like to congratulate the board members who were elected, and, including Nick, and also the new city council members. I think they'll do a good job. I'm sad to report that at the last city council meeting, on the way out the door, rather than doing things to shore up the community and to shore up the city council, they actually voted to spend $5.2 million of the $6 million unallocated reserve. It's equivalent to poking a hole in, there's a tidal wave coming of PERS, and there could be a tidal wave coming of Measure T, costs up to $3 million a year. We're told it's an equivalent of punching a hole in the life raft and then jumping out. And I don't know why they did it. The projects they picked were decent projects, but they had, as we do, like 100 projects. We have, there are 3 of 100 that they could have done, and they picked those 3, and none of them start with pothole. So I don't know. I'm just sad about it, and it leaves those like Mrs. Wallace, who I congratulate, in kind of a hole, a deeper hole than what was left to them already, and may be the best validation of the election after all. Still, I'd say it on the record. I feel better. Okay.
Anybody else have anything? I guess say before you go, Jim, I just wanted to just echo Dwayne and that congratulations to both Nick and Jim on your, and Chris, of course, on your reelection. And we're gonna, I take it for granted, whatever. And I personally am gonna be sad to see Dwayne go. I think he's been a really good asset to this board and really good for the community.
A lot of knowledge, a lot of knowledge.
I've enjoyed it greatly, and given any inclination on either one of your parts not to run, I shall return.
Okay, Jim, sorry.
Just a quick one, we'll be attending the Aqua Conference next week. I'll be there also for Monday for the JPIA. Shannon will also be there for the JPIA portion, and then the rest of the meeting. Evo and Shelley will be there for parts of the conference that are relative to what they do. So it should be an interesting week. That'll be the week after Thanksgiving.
All right. Cool. I think that's it for board member reports. How about the DORADO County Water Agency Purveyor report?
Well, thankfully, Jim attended with Richard yesterday, or was unable to go.
I did attend, along with Richard, and this is the first time I've been to one of the meetings in the new office there, so it's interesting to see some of the same people that have been involved in that process down there, been on the board for years. They'll have a change. There are two of the board members will not be there. They didn't get reelected. Rinaldi and for the county supervisors, and Dale Coco for the EIP will no longer be on the board, so there'll be a change. There were several items, and it was mostly just some stuff they were contracting out. They looking at water marketing strategy plan. That's going to go to a consulting firm. They had to revise their agricultural water demand projections, being done by another consulting firm, and then they have a comprehensive water resource development and management plan, which was going to kind of bring some of they've got quite a few plans, and the management plan hopefully will bring those together, and they'll have a better idea of where they're going. I think that Payne is doing a good job of pulling a lot of this stuff together and looking at the long-term program.
Yeah, and also an interesting conversation is Jim remembers way back when they were pursuing water rights in that project with SMUD. They had formed the Eldora County Water Power Authority, and Georgetown Divide was part of it, and when they pulled out, and so it was the county, the water agency, and the EID, and it was the management agreement the last 10 years expired, so now they have to get ad hoc committees together to reestablish it, and because of the moving target of some of the people being, not being reelected, and not wanting to violate the Brown Act, because the supervisors represent Eldora County and they sit on the water agency board, they had to basically pick the same two people to represent both, so they didn't violate the Brown Act in having these ad hoc committee meetings. So that was kind of an interesting discussion, and I guess I understand a couple of the previous meetings of the supervisors and the EID board were kind of contentious on how they were going to move forward, because some people didn't want it to just be a temporary deal, and then when that project with the Sacramento region was done, then eliminated. And I think other people would think that was more of a permanent kind of layer of bureaucracy of government. So it's an interesting dynamic that they'll be working on now.
Yeah, nothing really was decided yesterday.
Just who was on the ad hoc committee?
Yeah.
Which is Franson and Bierkamp. Those two supervisors will also represent the water agency. We don't want any water purveyors representing the water agency. So,
Well, we're not involved in that anyway. It's just EID. It was Georgetown Divide, but they pulled out, and I never really quite understood why at that point they just didn't dissolve it and use the EID.
Because it's really an EID planning project. But it was interesting because Brian Paulson basically objected to the one table in the presentation that said it had the shared cost of the county, the water agency, and EID, and then on the accrued benefits table, it showed 100% going to EID. He's going, no, the county's benefiting by this too. It's like, I think he kind of didn't want people to take that in and go, why are we paying anything? Because we're not involved, but it's like, if they take too much of the property tax money out of the agency, it leaves less for us. So it's kind of, we're indirectly involved in terms of our money is indirectly involved. So hopefully indirectly, not directly. So that was interesting, but that was the third big topic.
Okay, thanks for doing that, Jim. Richard, your report.
The only thing I think that we need to report on is Chris has a report on a suggested change to the billing for the stormwater pump station that we take care of for the city.
Good afternoon. He's correct. I want to run past the board here. In October of 2014, the district entered an agreement with the city of South Lake Tahoe, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, as far as taking care of the Bijou stormwater station. At the time when this was all made up, I wasn't involved, unfortunately. I came later to the game. But at that point, we set up to where the city, we would kind of estimate each year what the cost was of us going out throughout the year to check out the station. So the city was paying us whatever number we came up with that kind of covered everything for the year as far as our work. And it's 2018 now, and things have gone very well with the stormwater station. We work closely with Chuck Taylor at the city, and we don't go to that storm station near as much as we used to. We used to go out and check on it every day, that type of deal. So we've narrowed it down now where we sat down together, came up with an agreement. All we do is answer alarms when they come in, usually during the storms. Each year is going to vary because, this year they need to have the oil changed in the ponds, kind of go over them, things like that. So each year it varies, not by a whole lot anymore. But what I'm asking today is if anybody on the board has any concerns, if I got rid of the estimation part of it. I spent a lot of time going through, figuring out the bill, figuring out what could be charged for next year. And it turns out it's a nightmare also for the city, trying to, pay out the money, the credit, keeping track of the credit, how much they've given us, how much we've used, etc. If nobody has any objections, Chuck Taylor and I would like to try, instead of getting paid every year, we do it twice a year. Their year end is in October, ours is in the end of June. So talking with Chuck, if nobody has any objections, what we'd like to do is at 6 months, say in October, I sit down, I run a report out of maintenance connection, it gives me all the work orders, I total it up, I bill the city.
So you're getting rid of the estimates and you're just going to billing based on your time?
Yes. Now, this is where you're going to want to watch Gary's face. We have an agreement here, but at this point, we weren't going to change any wording if nobody objected. This was something Chuck and I say. We were just going to give it a try. And
it makes more sense to me than...
And then also in May...
well, because you sit down, you spend all this time estimating, and what good's the estimate? You're still going to pay the actual hours, or they're still going to pay the actual hours.
Exactly. So this is just streamlining everything so there's less time spent trying to figure it out as well. And if there's no objections, we'd like to give this a try for a while. And if something changes, I'll come back. I don't believe it is. I believe we've built a pretty good relationship with the city. I trust Chuck. I believe Chuck trusts me and the district. So it's something we'd like to try if nobody has any objections to it.
Chris, you said you were thinking of billing them twice a year. Is there a reason not to just do once a year?
No, but we figured twice a year, it's like how they bill us for patches. We get patches, they give us a bill. Kind of the same thing. After their year end in October, I send them a bill. This was actually Chuck's suggestion. Okay. In October, I send them a bill for the previous 6 months or whatever. And then in May, I also send out another bill for another 6 months. And to me, that seemed pretty good. Twice a year instead of once a year and all the estimating that goes into it.
And it's like what you're doing with the road patching anyways.
Yes, sir.
We wouldn't be we'll be stuck funding them the money for a year before getting reimbursed.
This is our labor and time for the year, right?
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I say that we sit down and do all the estimating. It's not like it's days on end, but it is an amount of time there. I think I could be doing a lot of different things instead of trying to figure out an estimate for a year. And like I said, right now, with the relationship that the district's built with the city, it just works out better for everybody, I think.
I have no objections, no suggestions. Makes more sense to me, simple is better. Gary has, I see, he had his fingers in his ear. They must have slipped out.
I knew the look on his face was going to be great.
Maybe why don't you do this is do a short letter to him. I say, notwithstanding what the contract says, we talked with this, we're going to try this for a while. This letter just confirms that arrangement with you.
I figured I'd do like what I've known from in the past, basically a letter just added to the original contract. Is that kind of what you're saying?
No, just a side letter.
Oh, just a side letter.
Just a
Okay.
side letter and say, this is how we're going to handle this situation going forward on a trial basis for whatever period you want to try it.
Okay.
I'm assuming you're not talking about what you thought originally was going to be a fair amount of money advanced by the district. It's come down to not being much.
Yes, when this was all, like I said, I came in late into the game. But I think when this was all arranged, we didn't know how much was going to be spent, what we were going to be doing at the time, what all it entailed. So after a few years, we kind of streamlined it to where we're not out there very much at all. But we are out there helping with the ponds. We help whenever they have a problem. We've supplied plugs before because the lake was coming up and backflowing in the pipe. So we do work closely with Chuck and the city, and I'd like to continue that. But this just helps streamline the building.
Okay, I did want to do one more thing. Sure. Just wanted to mention, this isn't connected with.
Oh, thank you guys.
This is we had a BCE meeting, a public outreach meeting on November 7th. The crowd again was a little smaller than the second meeting, which was smaller than the first meeting, so I guess I take that as that the public is maybe not as worried. Most of the customers were Lucan's customers, according to Jennifer. And we had more than half the meeting was Kennedy Jenks presenting an update on the completion of the field work and the process that they were under in terms of formulating alternatives to use the groundwater model to evaluate how to best approach the problem. And so the plan is to continue moving forward, to continue with approximately quarterly meetings, keeping the public up to date on both our process and our project. And Mahan is now part of the committee at the front, and they are reporting on their progress that Mahan is making with the money the state board is giving them to investigate the problem, in addition to their efforts to get the RPs to try to do cleanup as well. Mahan is actually getting money, like the Sender wells, for example, that were in our ask of Mahan. A lot of the staff believe that they can get the money from the state and actually, under with their contractor, that was a contractor, actually drill and put those Sender wells in for us. So anyway, so it's looks like it's a cooperative effort moving forward. We'll see how fast they can really mobilize and get money to get things done. But it's I think headed in a positive direction. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Okay. Okay, anything else, Richard?
No, there is a staff report.
Right, no, I got that, it's coming up next. We're going to talk about the TTD's latest loop road environmental report. And John, your name's on it.
Oh, I'm on that?
Your name's on it.
Yeah, sure. So everybody knows about the Loop Road project, and we made some estimates on what it would cost to relocate and modify water and sewer utilities, given their scenario B is the proposed scenario for the Loop Road project. And our estimate was about 3.4, up to, I should say, 3.4, $3.5 million. So recently, they're in the process of finalizing the EIS for that Loop Road project. And at the draft stage, we made comment asserting our need to have the project pay for any of those modifications to the water and sewer systems. So that was submitted as part of the draft project. They responded to those effectively. Staff has reviewed their response to comments. Gary has reviewed their response to comments, and they're all incorporated in the final EIS document. So in addition to that, I attended the TTD meeting last Friday and spoke on the public record and received assurances from the board, and Nancy McDermott's on the board, and from the board chair, which is Steve Teixeira. and also from the agencies, the Tahoe Transportation, TTD's general manager is Carl Hasty. So they all spoke to this issue and their assurances that the project and any project would pay for these modifications and relocations of utilities.
I appreciate the promises, but unless it's on paper.
It's on paper, it's in the
Okay.
final EIR, EIS, and it's on the public record at the board meeting.
Okay, I read the language, I wasn't as thrilled with it, but it said that the project not contractor, but project proponent would take care of it where appropriate or something like that. I knew that word.
They talked about, developers, the developers will come in and they will likely have their own environmental review process. And even as a condition of service, we would make them responsible for these modifications to the systems.
It was quite a love fest today. They had people there with hats. There must have been, I don't know.
There was another meeting today.
They rushed this thing through because my guess is I've never seen it happen at this speed ever, have you? I mean, they did the advisory planning commission meeting. 3 days later, they did the TTD board, voted on it. And just 4 or 5 days later, the chair of the board voted on it. I tried to attend all 3 meetings, and it was a whirlwind of trying to find out what was on the agenda, what wasn't on the agenda, what was noticed, wasn't noticed. And I think they did it because they wanted to catch Austin Sauce, who was on the board to represent the city. They needed the city to show support, and maybe some of the other people that might not get elected, they didn't know. So that's my guess. I've never, in my 45 years here, seen anything rush fast, so fast. In 2.5 weeks, 3 major boards, and it's done. And everybody spoke glowingly of it. There wasn't much, well, there was recognition language in there that said, yes, we're going to materially affect the character and some other word of this ethnic community, but that's okay, we're going to protect the environment. We're splitting the ethnic community right down the middle. So
It's a gentrification, I'm not sure if that's the term.
gentrification is I've heard those words. That word's been used in worse circumstances, which gives it a bad meaning. But I'm just saying that not everybody was for it, but there was really quite a love fest there. And David Jenkins got up and spoke on behalf of the chamber and said, I just want you to recognize that most of the project's going to be in California. And the voters of California voted by 60% that they wanted to take a vote on this, and that the city is going to be involved every step along the way for approvals, and you might want to slow down a little bit and make sure the voters are behind you. They just talked it through. That's my guess, is because they wanted to get it for the elected officials on their last day out, and it worked with Mr. Sauce.
Yeah, I can speak to the reasons why they brought it forth in November exactly that it could be. It's pretty standard. I mean, it went to the Cherokee board today, and the Advanced Planning Committee usually acts on that or makes comments on that within the same month. And then they do it to the TTD, as I said, on Friday. So they're all in the process of finalizing and certifying the final EIS. And once that's done, there's a 30-day review process for opposition. Gary, I worked with Gary on this. I don't know if you have anything to add to my comments.
Maybe just a couple things, and maybe this is a response maybe to Randy, your comment. I think district staff has done as much as they could as far as making the record that everyone's agreeing that TDD or the project component will pay for utility relocation. But as I've talked with staff, just because it says that in the environmental document doesn't mean it's so. And so it's not 100%, but they'd have, I think, have a lot of egg on their face if they try to back away from that after making those public representations. And I think, as John said, your condition to serve a project as developed could condition relocation of utilities to serve those projects if needed. So I think you have some ability beyond the representations or any agreement you have with TDD in the future.
My hope is that there's some parts of it that will actually improve our system because there are pipes that we haven't touched in a while. I'm not sure that's too much of the case, but my other concern is that some of the other projects that we want to do that Shannon has put on the list, that John might get put off because we're deciding to relocate quite a lot of it.
And I mentioned that $3.5 million estimate, that's really what we see as worst case. And I've been working with the TTD and they agreed to bring us in early in on the process with the developer because there's a lot of things that they can do and the developer can do to avoid much of those impacts. So to reduce the cost of the modifications. So we took it, you know, those 3 areas that are part of the redevelopment plan. We have stewards going through 2 of those areas, and if they can work around those, give us easements and keep those sewers in place, the impacts will be very low. But if they want that whole footprint to do whatever, we got several lines to put pump stations in to take it over a couple streets over. That's where you get to the $3+ million.
Okay, if that's, nobody has anything else, thank you, John.
I know some.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Regarding the Shea Lake trial, you recall at the last meeting, I reported that the trial was expected to go to the jury a week ago today, so last Thursday, the 8th, actually. I hadn't heard anything, none of us had heard anything, so I emailed the attorney that's been representing us best year this morning, and I heard back during our workshop this afternoon. Unfortunately, if you remember, this portion of the trial just involved the exemplar plaintiffs, which is us, Palmdale Water District, Cayugas Water District, City of Reno, and the City of Roanoke, Virginia. Unfortunately, it did go to the jury, but there was a mistrial.
Really?
Yes, the jury could not come up with an award determination. But Bashir emailed me an article from the Law 360, which I guess they release information about trials.
It's a wire service.
Okay. But there was some kind of disturbing information that, or issues that took place during the trial that had a big impact on what that award would be anyway. So during the trial, the judge actually ruled in a much reduced damages amount that the jury could even rule on. And what they said was that the plaintiffs could not ask for the costs of actually replacing the line, and installing the line. They could only ask for the actual cost of the pipe itself, which was between
the whole project.
Yes, between those 5 plaintiffs, that total cost was only $2.1 million. So that would have been the amount that would have even been distributed between those 5 plaintiffs if the jury would have come to that conclusion. So the defendants are obviously very empowered by this ruling, or by the mistrial, because the jury couldn't even determine how to split 2.1 million, let alone the tens of millions that were being asked for. So not good news.
So where are we then? Are we talking about a whole new trial?
They don't know yet.
And if there was a whole new trial, would that previous judge's cap remain on the next trial?
I don't have that information either. Yeah. We'll have to see.